The first thing she saw wasn't the target, it was the trap. Staff Sergeant Raina Calder lay still on a barren ridge, 2 kilometers from the city of Adira. It was 5:30 hours. The sun was burning the chill from the Iraqi desert. She was the eyes for the 12 men of the Ranger Patrol, their long-range overwatch. 5 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment, 4 combat tour, and she had learned that true safety didn't come from armor. It came from silence, distance, and the one thing fear couldn't touch: precision. Her M110 semi-auto sniper system felt like an extension of her lean, hard-muscled body. Her hazel eyes, framed by dark brown hair braided tight, read the terrain like a coded map. The mission was simple: scout an industrial quarter for an insurgent cell leader. But at 6:15, as she glanced the derelict site through her Mark V scope, the simple mission evaporated. 3 men appeared, moving with deliberate military intent, clearing buildings with practiced speed. They were not wandering gunmen. They were a team. Over the next 90 minutes, Raina watched the enemy count climb. 2 by 2, 3 by 3, they flowed into the compound's perimeter, setting firing lanes, mounting heavy weapons. PKM machine guns, RPG-7 launchers, even a Dragunov sniper rifle. A cold dread, sharp and professional, settled in her chest. This was not a skirmish, it was a professional ambush. By 800 hours she had counted 32 hostiles, 32 men armed for a wipeout, waiting with professional patience to let the patrol walk inside a designated kill zone. Raina was a world away from her brothers. Her job was to warn them. Her sole purpose was to keep them alive. She keyed the radio. Overwatch 7 to Ranger 24, I have eyes on enemy movement. Count 32 hostiles, heavy weapons, establishing ambush around Compound Delta. The air crackled with frustration. The comms were trash. The dense urban sprawl swallowed the signal. Ranger 24, copy, interference heavy, continuing to checkpoint, a faint voice replied. They hadn't understood. They were marching straight toward danger. The single barrier between them and extinction was her. The anxiety was a physical knot, tight and dry, but Raina acknowledged it, compartmentalized it, and pushed it down. Fear, she knew, was only information. It told her the stakes were real. She tried again, a final, strained plea against the static. The reply was just a faint acknowledgement, nothing solid. And then, at 8:30 hours, Sergeant First Class Mark Thorne's unit of 12 Rangers walked through the compound's southern gate. They were searching for a secure comms point. They had no idea they were already surrounded. The insurgents waited. The silence was the last breath before the storm. And then the first RPG screamed. The radio immediately hissed with raw tension. Contact. We're surrounded, multiple hostiles, heavy fire on all sides, need support now. Sergeant First Class Thorne's voice, clipped and strained, cut through. We're pinned inside the compound. RPGs, machine guns, casualties piling up, enemies everywhere. Raina pressed her eye to the M110 scope. Her brothers were trapped in a kill zone. She was all they had left. But there was something she hadn't yet calculated: the exact sequence of shots that would break the enemy's will. Raina slowed her breath. She had 180 rounds of 7.62 match-grade ammo. The fight was 520 meters away, through haze and dust, and she knew with cold clarity that what unfolded over the next 20 minutes would redefine every rule of engagement. Sometimes salvation doesn't roar. It cracks softly once from a distant ridge. Raina locked on her first silhouette, the northern rooftop PKM gunner. The heavy machine gun was hammering the patrol nonstop. He leaned out for a better angle, half exposed. She exhaled halfway, found her pause, and squeezed the trigger. The M110 cracked softly through its suppressor. In her scope, the gunner folded backward. The PKM went dead. 1 down, 31 left. The Ranger's fate was now a matter of her discipline, her training, and the rate at which she could pull the trigger. She shifted fluidly to the next mark. The RPG operator on the eastern building, 485 meters. He was prepping to fire again. A rocket would end this instantly, turning a desperate defense into a massacre. She let him just a hair, pulled the trigger, and watched him drop before he could launch. 2 down. The frantic firing inside the compound continued, but outside, the invisible hand of a lone sniper was already reshaping the geometry of the battle. Her third target, the commander on the western roof, signaling orders with his radio. The man who was directing the slaughter. Her round hit high in the chest. He fell, the radio clattering beside him. 3 down. Inside the compound, the Rangers were fighting for their lives, outnumbered nearly 3-1. But the enemy fighters who had been confident moments before began to drop, one by one, cut down by a ghost beyond the city's edge. The fourth target, the southern PKM nest 505 meters, neutralized. The fifth target was the deadliest threat to both her and the patrol. A Dragunov sniper, northeastern roof, 610 meters. He was the first to realize where she was. She caught the shimmer of heat rising from the roof, took her time and fired once. The hostile sniper slumped behind his rifle, 5 hostiles down in 90 seconds. Inside the compound, Sergeant First Class Mark Thorne, a 36-year-old Georgia native with 10 years in the regiment, was unflinching. His voice, a heavy draw under stress, was directing the defense. Second team, suppress that east building. First team, prep smoke for withdrawal. Specialist Caleb Reed, a 24-year-old Brooklyn native, laid suppressive bursts with his M4. Then he realized a terrifying truth. The relentless machine gun fire had gone quiet. Something was fundamentally wrong. Drew Collins, the team's breacher and demolitions expert, pointed toward the northern roof. That machine gunner just dropped. Nobody from our angle hit him. Round came from outside. Thorne understood at once. Someone was watching them from a distance, from beyond the edge of their map. The hope was a sudden, violent surge that cut through his exhaustion. He keyed the radio, his voice strained but steady. Any friendly sniper elements on our position? Reyna's calm reply cut through the static. Overwatch 7, I have your coordinates, Ranger 24. Continue engaging close threats. I'm clearing the outer perimeter. Thorne felt a wave of relief. A sniper, thank God. Reyna, operating with mechanical efficiency, was already on the next target. Her training was a simple, brutal flow chart. Heavy weapons first, then leadership, then anyone actively threatening the patrol. Sixth target, RPG team, northern building, 530 meters. Gunner down, the loader fled. Seventh, a fighter trying to flank from the east, 445 meters, dropped before he could reach his position. Eighth, PKM gunner who had shifted to a new building, 525 meters down. The enemy, realizing their ambush was being killed by a ghost, began to react. Blind fire erupted toward her ridge. Rounds cracked off the rocks, sending chips and sparks flying around her hide. The fire was disorganized, angry, and blind. She didn't flinch. Her position offered solid cover, her camouflage was perfect. She just kept working the problem. Ninth target, a spotter with binoculars, western roof, 555 meters, eliminated before he could pinpoint her. 10th, an insurgent moving another RPG into position, 490 meters down. 11th, the radio coordinator, 510 meters, neutralized. She was not focused on the people, she was focused on the system. Her mind was running the equation, 12 Rangers plus 1 sniper versus an ambush that didn't know she existed. Surprise and precision were multiplying her force. Inside, Thorne gave the order, pop smoke. White smoke grenades went out, carving a swirling screen between the Rangers and the hostile positions. The Rangers were executing textbook fire and maneuver, moving in practice teams. The smoke complicated everything. It blurred her direct line of vision, but Reyna, whose confidence was born of thousands of hours of automatic action, adjusted instantly. She tracked muzzle flashes on the perimeter. 12th target, a fighter creeping toward the compound under the smoke's cover, 455 meters down. 13th, PKM nest relocated to the northeastern structure, 595 meters down. Thorne's voice cut in again. Overwatch 7, we're setting to breach west wall for extract. Can you suppress? Roger 24, I've got clear lines on the western building. Any hostile that shows himself, I'll drop him, copy. She swung her rifle. 3 insurgents scrambled onto the rooftop, preparing to rain fire on the escape route. It was an ambush against their withdrawal. 3 shots in 8 seconds. 3 fell. "Western roof clear," she transmitted. "You're good to move." The determination was absolute. She was not leaving this position until every single Ranger was safe. The Rangers flooded through the newly breached wall and into the alley, forming a defensive ring. 3 were wounded, but none fatally. They were alive. The insurgents, however, refused to relent. Fighters from the south began to close in, trying to cut them off in the maze of alleys. Reyna spotted the movement. "Ranger 24, you've got 8 hostiles pushing from your south. Range 200 meters. They're trying to block your exit." Thorne's voice was strained. "Can you hit them?" "Negative, they're too close. Buildings in my line, you'll have to handle it." "Roger, all elements contact south." The Rangers prepped an instant ambush. When the 8 insurgents turned the corner, they walked straight into a storm of measured, disciplined fire. Caleb Reed's strength kept his M4 locked and steady. Drew Collins had set up a cross-angle, trapping them. 15 seconds later, all 8 were down. The Rangers pushed on, weaving through the industrial ruins toward the open desert where the Quick Reaction Force, QRF, was closing in. Reyna stayed on overwatch. 5 more fighters tried to engage from above. 3 went down to her shots between 540 and 580 meters. The rest ran. Thorne's patrol broke free of the district and dug in at a cleared lot. Against every impossible odd, all 12 Rangers were alive after 23 minutes in the kill zone. Her final task was not to allow the remaining insurgents to regroup and ambush the incoming QRF. She methodically picked off visible targets. A PKM crew shifting positions, both dropped at 515 meters. 3 fighters huddled in talk, likely coordinating their next push, gone within 5 seconds at 495 meters. Another tried to recover weapons from his fallen comrades, neutralized at 530 meters. By the time the QRF, 4 strikers carrying a full platoon, rolled in, the battlefield had gone silent. Reyna had fired 127 rounds. She had tallied 38 confirmed kills and 11 probable. The ambush team of 32 had become a handful of survivors retreating into Adira's streets. Thorne's voice crackled over the net, no longer frantic but steady. "Overwatch 7, this is Ranger 24. All personnel accounted for, casualties stable, prepping for vehicle extract. Join us at pickup." "Roger 24, moving to your location now." Reyna cleared her rifle, packed her gear, and began the 2-kilometer trek. It was the quiet professionalism that kept the weight of her actions from crushing her. 40 minutes later, she reached the extraction point. The Rangers were loading into the strikers. Thorne came straight to her. His face was streaked with dust and sweat. The exhaustion of the fight was visible, mixed with a raw, powerful gratitude. He extended a firm, tired hand. "Staff Sergeant Calder, I don't know how to thank you. We were finished." "That ambush was professional, planned tight. We were outnumbered 3-1. No way out," he said, his voice thick. "Then you started firing and everything changed." Reyna shook his hand. "That's the job, Sergeant. Overwatch means keeping you alive. I just did what I was trained for." 38 confirmed kills in 23 minutes, Thorne repeated, shaking his head. "You didn't just cover us. You broke their ambush and saved 12 Rangers." Then the youngest Ranger, Corporal Owen Cross, 22, approached. The strain of his first real firefight was etched on his face, his hands still trembling faintly from leftover adrenaline. "Ma'am, I thought we were done. Not going to lie, I was scared." He paused, his voice wavering with sincere emotion. "But when those guns went quiet and the RPGs stopped, I knew someone up there was watching over us. Thank you for getting us home, for letting me see my family again." Staff Sergeant Elias Morno, the veteran weapon squad leader, his vest scorched from a near-miss RPG, broke into a smile. "Calder, I fought alongside snipers from every branch. But what you did out there was beyond anything I've seen." His praise was not flattery, it was the honest respect of a seasoned warrior. Precision under fire, perfect target calls, and pure control. You didn't support us. You saved us. You turned a slaughter into survival. He raised his fist and Reyna met it. Respect. Drew Collins, the quiet breacher, stepped forward next. Ma'am, I've been doing this 8 years. I've seen ambushes like that end badly every time. He looked her in the eye. The only reason we're standing here is because you were on that ridge. You didn't miss. You didn't flinch. You're a true ranger. Caleb Reed, the big ex-football player, came up grinning. Staff Sergeant, I owe you a beer. Hell, a whole case. You just gave me the chance to go home and see my girl. Maybe finally start that family we keep talking about. Reyna looked over the dozen rangers. Tired, filthy, some bandaged, but all alive. Each of them would return to their families, their futures intact because she had been on that ridge. The weight of that responsibility, the quiet satisfaction of having met it, sat heavy in her chest. Rangers lead the way, she said. I just make sure the path is clear. That's what we do. We watch out for our brothers and sisters always. You're one of us, Calder, Thorne rasped with feeling. Not because of the patch on your shoulder, but because you proved it today. When we needed someone most, you were there. That's what being a ranger means. The convoy rolled back toward Camp Hawthorne. Reyna rode in Thorne's vehicle, finally allowing the exhaustion of 30 hours with hardly any sleep to catch up to her. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Thorne sat opposite, studying her with a mix of curiosity and deep respect. Can I ask you something? He said. When you saw that ambush forming this morning, when you realized we were walking into it and comms were trash, what went through your head? Reyna weighed the question. She didn't think about the odds or facing 32 insurgents alone. I was asking how to be most effective from where I was, counting targets, prioritizing threats, doing the math on ranges and angles. She explained the logic. Heavy weapons first. Those PKMs and RPGs would have ended the patrol in seconds. Then leadership. Take out who's directing them. Then anyone posing an immediate danger to you guys. The equation was 12 rangers plus one sniper versus an ambush that didn't know I existed. She leaned forward slightly. Surprise multiplies force, so does precision and height. She had only needed to tip the balance. You're rangers, you train for this. You just needed someone to tip the balance. Thorne smiled, shaking his head in disbelief. A bit, he said. You call cutting their force by 2/3 a bit. You ranger snipers are a different breed. Ice water in your veins. She offered a small, knowing correction. Training and experience, fears information. It tells you the stakes matter and you need to be sharp. You acknowledge it, compartmentalize it, and do your job. I couldn't afford fear when my guys were counting on me. Drew Collins, nearby, asked the question that always lingered after combat. With every shot, what were you thinking? The person or the target? Reyna paused, picking her words with great care. I was thinking about you guys, keeping you alive. She drew a line in the moral sand. The people were threats because of the weapons they carried. My job is to remove the threat. I don't dwell on the person. I think about the weapon system, the danger it poses, and the most efficient way to stop it. That's how I keep this work from destroying me. Focus on protecting the team, not on taking lives. Caleb leaned in. How do you keep so calm? Bullets were cracking all around. Training, Reyna said plainly. Thousands of hours until the actions are automatic. Your body does the job even if your mind wants to panic. She added that she trusted her position, her camouflage, and the fact that the enemy was firing blind at her general area. So, I stayed calm, held my spot, and kept working the problem. Owen Cross, the youngest, asked softly, does it ever get easier, the fear? I was terrified today. Reyna met him with understanding. Fear's normal, it's healthy, it keeps you sharp and focused, it never fully goes away, you just get better at functioning with it. What changes is confidence in the training and the team. You learn to trust that you've been prepared, that your brothers have your back, and that if you do your job, you'll get through. She gave him a gentle, professional nod. You did good today, Owen. You stayed in the fight, followed orders, and watched your teammates. That's all anyone can ask. The debrief at Camp Hawthorne ran 5 hours. Raina sat across from Colonel Mira Sutton, the battalion commander, and the intelligence and operations officers. They walked through the engagement with methodical precision. Raina used aerial imagery to show her perch, the insurgent positions, and every target she had engaged. Captain Alina Price, the senior intel analyst, cross-checked her account with signals, drone footage, and the after-action reports. Major Ryan Cho, the ops officer, studied the data with obvious amazement. 38 confirmed kills, he said. Average engagement range 520 meters. Combat duration 23 minutes under direct fire at your position. He paused, his usually reserved demeanor giving way to genuine awe. A 94% hit rate under combat conditions. Staff Sergeant, these are exceptional numbers by any standard. Some of the best I've seen in 20 years of combat reviews. I had a good position and clear targets, sir, she replied, ever focused on the tactical truth. The ridge gave me elevation, sight lines, and solid cover. They were focused on the compound, not on a sniper outside the urban area. Colonel Sutton leaned in, her eyes sharp. She had reviewed Raina's full-service record, 5 years, 4 deployments, consistently outstanding ratings. What you did today shows not just technical skill, but tactical judgment, coolness under fire, and total commitment to your teammates. The colonel did not mince words. I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. Your actions directly saved 12 Rangers who almost certainly would have been killed or captured. Thank you, ma'am. Just doing my Overwatch job, Raina said quietly. Your job is sniper work, Sutton replied firmly. What you did went beyond that. You made rapid tactical decisions in a fluid fight, adapted to changing conditions, kept precision under direct multidirectional fire, and literally changed the outcome single-handedly. You demonstrated the warrior ethos this regiment needs. Thorne, who had been sitting quietly, spoke up to support her. Colonel, if I may, there's a tactical and cultural point to record. He emphasized that the ambush was set by professionals. Staff Sergeant Calder defeated that plan through superior skill, tactics, and sheer determination. She adapted faster than they could react, prioritized targets better than they could coordinate, and stayed effective under fire while they tried to suppress her. She's a credit to the regiment. Exactly the kind of warrior we want to build. Colonel Sutton agreed. Raina, I'm also putting you up for accelerated promotion to Sergeant First Class and lining you up for senior sniper instructor and team leader duty. She saw not just a fighter, but a teacher. The regiment needs operators with your level of skill not just to fight, but to train the next generation. The pride was not in the medals or the promotion, but in the knowledge that her purpose would now extend beyond the scope. She would pass on the lessons of the Ridge, how to function when the mind wanted to panic, how to calculate life and death in a heartbeat. The moral reflection was simple. Competence is its own form of moral victory. 4 weeks later, Raina was back on a desert ridge. The sun was the same, the silence was the same, but this time she was not alone. Private First Class Noah Lane, 21, Louisiana native, fresh out of sniper school, sat beside her with his own M110. They were overwatching a patrol along the outskirts of Darana. Raina was running him through the critical lessons, how to read terrain, spot patterns, and identify threats before they became active. Noah was raw, keen, and inexperienced, exactly the sort who needed combat mentorship to become truly effective. What do you see? Raina asked softly, both glassing the morning light. Patrol moving up Route Michigan, Noah said in a slow drawl. Civilians on the street, traffic looks normal. Look closer. Third building on the left, second floor, window facing the road, Noah said, adjusting his scope. Wait, is that curtain moving? No wind today. Windows shut. Someone's behind it. Nice catch. Someone's watching the patrol from concealment. Anxiety was a necessary teacher in this phase, training the new sniper to feel the pressure of the unknown. Could be curious, could be a spotter. What do we do? Noah thought it through, reciting his training. Monitor, don't engage. Mark it and watch for more hostile indicators. Stay aware. Right, good judgment. Patience matters as much as precision. We don't shoot without positive hostile intent. Keep eyes on that window and report any change. Over the next hour, Reyna walked him through practical observation, separating normal civilian actions from tactical prep, spotting hidden weapons, reading body language that signals hostile intent. When a suspicious car approached, a white sedan rolling slowly, occupants scanning their surroundings as if casing the route, Noah saw it first. Vehicle approaching from the south, he reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. Behaviors anomalous, too slow for normal traffic. Occupants conducting visual surveillance. Could be recon. Good eye, range about 485 meters. What's your engagement call? Noah hesitated. Monitor, don't engage yet. Could be nervous civilians. Wait for positive indicators before committing lethal force. Correct, Reyna said. That's patience and judgment. We have rules of engagement for a reason. You need clear, confirmed, hostile intent before pulling the trigger. The car rolled past the patrol without incident, ultimately harmless. Noah took a quiet breath and learned a crucial truth. Not every anomaly means a shot, and discipline means knowing when not to fire. Sometimes, restraint saves a life just as much as a bullet. But 20 minutes later, the training became brutally real. Two men appeared on a rooftop setting up an unmistakable RPG-7. Noah caught it immediately. Contact rooftop 610 meters. Two males confirmed RPG. They're preparing to engage our patrol. Good identification, Reyna said evenly. You're cleared to engage. Take the shot when ready. Noah steadied his breathing, calculated distance and wind, and fired. Through Reyna's scope, she saw the gunner jerk backward and drop from the roof. Noah transitioned smoothly, struck the loader, and both threats were down before either could fire a single rocket. Both confirmed, Reyna said. Excellent shooting, you just saved American lives. How do you feel? Noah's breath came fast, adrenaline shaking his hands, but his face held a steady confidence. Like I finally made a difference, like the training paid off. It did, Reyna said. 9 Rangers in that patrol are alive right now because you saw the threat and neutralized it before it could hurt them. She taught him the final, most important lesson. That's what this job about, not glory or medals or numbers. It's about making sure our people go home. You did good today, Noah. Trust your training, trust your gut. You'll be a damn fine sniper. 6 months later, back at Fort Summit, Reyna stood in formation. The Bronze Star was pinned to her chest. The citation read before the assembled regiment. For heroic achievement in combat against enemy forces in Iraq. Staff Sergeant Reyna Calder distinguished herself through courage and exceptional skill when a Ranger patrol was ambushed by a superior force in the city of Adira. The words confirmed the legend. From an exposed ridge under direct enemy fire, Staff Sergeant Calder engaged 32 enemy combatants over a 23-minute fight, achieving 38 confirmed kills and breaking the ambush through precision and tactical mastery. Her actions directly saved 12 Rangers and embodied extraordinary valor in the face of overwhelming odds. Thorne, Morneau, Collins, Reed, and Cross stood among the audience, the men whose lives she had saved. After the ceremony, they gathered outside in the soft Georgia sun. You know your story is part of Ranger School now, right? Morneau said with a grin. The sniper who came through the smoke and took apart an entire ambush to save a patrol. You're a legend already. Reyna smiled faintly. She always told new sniper candidates the same thing. Being a sniper isn't about the longest shot, the kill count, or the medals. It's about being the one your teammates trust when everything's on the line. It was about staying calm when others panicked, being precise when others sprayed rounds, and guarding your brothers and sisters no matter how bad the odds looked. And when they asked her about fear, about being outnumbered, being under fire, having 12 lives depending on a single pull of the trigger, she repeated the greatest lesson of the Ridge. Fear is just information. It reminds you the stakes are real and that your work matters. You acknowledge it, respect it, Then set it aside and focus on what you can control. Your breathing, your aim, your trigger, your target. She would pause, letting the true weight of the job sink in. Because somewhere down in that city, valley, or compound, Rangers are fighting for their lives and counting on you to be perfect when it counts most. That's not pressure, she would conclude, that's purpose. Sometimes the greatest strength is not the loudest voice in the chaos, but the quietest breath before the trigger squeeze. What if the most terrifying sound in a firefight isn't the explosion, but the sudden silence? The first shot was a clean, single crack, quickly muted by the heavy-duty suppressor, yet to Staff Sergeant Mark Thorne, pinned behind a cinderblock wall inside the compound, it was the sound of a miracle. He had seen his northern machine gunner, the one pinning his first squad, fall backward off the roof, his PKM chatter dying instantly. It was impossible. His men had no clear shot. Before Thorne could process the sheer logistical unlikelihood, the second, softer crack followed, and the Eastern RPG launcher team, poised to vaporize his position, simply disappeared. The rocket never fired. In the span of 3 seconds, the enemy's most lethal fire support vanished, and the coordinated assault dissolved into confusion. Reyna, lying on the ridge, her cheek welded to the stock of her M110, felt the familiar, rhythmic pulse of adrenaline and absolute focus. She did not feel the weight of the men she had just killed. That emotion, the humanity of it, was locked away in a soundproof box in her mind, a vital defense mechanism she had built over years of war. She only felt the cold, hard certainty of the crosshairs. Her world was reduced to the 2.5-inch dot of the enemy's vital area, the atmospheric data printed faintly in her scope display, and the microscopic movement of her trigger finger. Discipline was the only currency that mattered now. Every round had to be a solution. A miss meant more time exposed for her patrol. It meant a casualty. She shifted fluidly, barely disturbing the sand beneath her ghillie suit. Her next target was the highest priority threat to the enemy's cohesion, the commander. He was on the western rooftop, shouting into a radio, clearly trying to re-establish control over the disintegrating ambush. A leader's job is to impose order. Reyna's job was to impose chaos. She adjusted her point of aim slightly, accounting for the 600-meter range and the rising desert heat causing thermal shimmer. She knew the round would take almost a second to travel. She waited for the commander to lean out, a flash of bravado that was his final mistake. The rifle cracked. The man crumpled, his radio clattering away, the sound ironically sharp even at that distance. 3 down. The communication network was broken. Inside the compound, Thorne finally had his answer. A voice, calm, professional, and entirely new, cut through the frantic static on his tactical net. Overwatch 7 to Ranger 24, I have your coordinates. 3 hostile leaders, heavy weapons neutralized. Continue engaging close threats. I'm clearing the outer perimeter. Thorne keyed his mic, his heart hammering with a sudden, violent surge of hope. Roger, Overwatch 7. Solid copy. Thank you, God. The mystery of their sudden survival was solved. Not an air strike, not the QRF, but a single, unseen sniper. It was a lifeline thrown into a raging current. Thorne immediately barked new orders, his voice suddenly infused with authority. Listen up, we have Overwatch. Engage close threats only. No wasted rounds. She's clearing the perimeter. Let's go, we're taking the fight back to them. Reyna was already on her 4th and 5th targets, the southern PKM nest and the rival Dragunov sniper. She knew the enemy sniper was the biggest danger to her position. The man had seen the telltale shot placement, all head and chest, and was already sweeping the outer terrain looking for the telltale glint or dust signature of her hide. She had to take him out before he found her. Her finger tensed. She waited. The enemy sniper was a shadow, but the faint reflection off his objective lens shimmered. That was enough. A split second of calculated risk. Crack. The Dragunov user fell behind his weapon. The immediate danger to her was gone. The tactical reality of what she was doing began to register on the enemy. They were trained fighters. They realized they were being methodically disassembled by a ghost. Their initial ambush doctrine, wait and annihilate, turned into terrified improvisation. A cluster of 3 fighters, seeing their commander fall, tried to make a break for a new, covered position down an alley. Reyna tracked them as they ran, their speed forcing her to make a rapid lead adjustment, a skill demanding both instinct and rigorous calculation. One shot. The lead fighter dropped. The remaining 2 scattered, their anxiety now a visible tactical disadvantage. They were no longer hunters, they were prey. She let them run, prioritizing the threats still actively engaging the Rangers. The moral weight of her profession was a silent, internal echo she constantly suppressed. She knew that every time she squeezed the trigger, she was making a choice: the life of the target or the lives of 12 American soldiers. The moral calculus in combat, she had long decided, was simply survival. She wasn't judging a person. She was neutralizing an immediate, lethal threat. The determination was absolute. The 12 Rangers had families, had futures, had lives that depended on her perfect execution. The men below were trying to destroy that. She was the one protecting it. She saw the PKM operator from the southern team try to retrieve his fallen comrade's weapon. A single round intercepted him mid-reach. She was not firing randomly. She was solving a problem. She was breaking down the enemy's system of arms, communication, and leadership into its constituent parts and eliminating them in order of importance. The sheer volume of fire raining down on the Rangers began to slacken. It wasn't just the kills, it was the psychological terror. How can you fight what you cannot see? Where is the threat? The question tore through the insurgents' morale. Reyna, observing the fight, felt the cold press of the earth beneath her, the gritty taste of dust, and the burning need for precision. The total time elapsed since the ambush began was 7 minutes. She had fired 18 rounds. She had neutralized 12 immediate high-value threats. Her mind was a tactical computer, cold and uncaring, but her heart, the part she had locked away, was dedicated to the men below. Don't miss. They need you. Inside the compound, Thorne saw the opportunity. The fire was disorganized, panicked, and sparse. The courage that had been suppressed by the initial shock now flared. Drew set a charge on that west wall. Caleb suppressed the north alley. We're punching out. We're leaving nothing here but dust. The Rangers began to move, executing textbook fire and maneuver, the rhythm of their coordinated defense in stark contrast to the enemy's sudden disarray. The knowledge that Overwatch 7 was out there, a silent guardian dispensing lethal precision, fueled their movements. They were no longer pinned, they were attacking their escape. Reyna watched them go, her fingers hovering over the trigger, ready to deliver another solution the instant a threat presented itself. She knew this was the most dangerous moment, the withdrawal. She would have to be perfect. She would be perfect. The world outside the scope ceased to exist. She stood alone, but what came next no one expected. The silence that followed the breach of the western wall was thick, unnatural, and absolutely terrifying to the insurgents. The Rangers, led by Thorne, weren't retreating. They were executing a tactical shift, using the new exit to change the angle of the fight. As the patrol flooded into the narrow alley, the remaining enemy fighters realized their prize was escaping. The fear of failure, the humiliation of having a perfectly set ambush destroyed by an unseen force, spurred them to a frantic, disorganized pursuit. This was the moment of maximum danger, the transition from cover to the open, where a single, well-placed burst could end the withdrawal. Reyna, on her ridge, watched the flow of the battle with the cold, absolute clarity of a hawk tracking prey. She had told Thorne she would suppress the western building, and she meant it. 3 fighters scrambled onto the roof, intending to pour fire down the alley onto the escaping patrol. They moved with a desperate urgency that told Reyna they were committed to ending this now. Her eye moved. Target 1, Target 2, Target 3. The distance was tight, just over 500 meters. The threat was immediate. She didn't hesitate. The M110 cracked once, then twice, then a third time, the soft thud of the suppressor doing little to dampen the lethal rhythm of her work. 3 silhouettes poised to fire were suddenly gone, collapsing back onto the rooftop. "Western roof clear," she transmitted instantly, her voice a calm counterpoint to the distant din. "You're good to move, Ranger 24." But the enemy was adapting. From the south, an opportunistic pocket of 8 fighters began pushing hard, attempting to cut off the Rangers before they could reach the edge of the industrial sector. They were fast, weaving through the debris, trying to get within effective range for a flank and a blocking action. Reyna's heart hammered, not from fear but from the sudden, impossible frustration. They were too low, too fast, and a cluster of derelict buildings obscured her sightline. She knew she couldn't hit them. Her greatest advantage, distance and elevation, was temporarily defeated by the terrain. She keyed the radio, her voice edged with urgency. "Ranger 24, you've got 8 hostiles pushing from your south. Range 200 meters. They're trying to block your exit. I have no line of sight." Thorne's response was instant. He didn't panic, he had to trust his men. "Roger 7, we copy. All elements prepare for contact south." The Rangers, moving as a single, disciplined unit, melted into the shadows of a collapsing structure, setting an instant, brutal counterambush. They were outnumbered and wounded, but they were trained for exactly this contingency. When the 8 insurgents turned the corner, they walked into a wall of measured, disciplined automatic fire. No hesitation. No mercy. The ambush was defeated in 15 seconds by the sheer professionalism of the patrol. Reyna felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly broke her concentration. Her job was to provide the distance, but theirs was to hold the line in the brutal close quarters. They had held. They had survived. Now she had to ensure their path to the extraction point, an open lot 800 meters away, remained clear. She shifted her gaze back to the compound. The remaining insurgents were retreating, but dangerously. They were grabbing weapons, pulling their wounded comrades and running back into the denser, older part of Adira, the alleys and buildings that offered them concealment and a chance to regroup. If they were allowed to reform their lines, they could mount a second, equally deadly assault on the incoming QRF. Reyna recognized the profound, silent moral truth of her current task. The fight wasn't over until the threat was nullified. Allowing the remnants to escape simply meant another Ranger, another time, would have to face them. With cold, absolute resolve, she began to pick off the stragglers. A PKM crew, foolishly shifting position on an exposed rooftop, fell in quick succession at 515 meters. A trio of fighters, huddled in a doorway, clearly arguing about their next move, were eliminated before they could coordinate their retreat. Every shot was an act of prevention, a choice to save the next patrol, the next life. This was the burden she carried, the constant choice between immediate action and future safety. The broken feeling wasn't about her body, it was about the isolation. Lying alone on a ridge, witnessing the entire, brutal landscape of human conflict unfold below her, she was intimately connected to the men she was saving, yet entirely separated from the fight itself. She could hear their voices, see their desperate movements, but she could not feel the muzzle blast or the concussive shock of the RPGs. It was a terrifying, lonely power, and it demanded a level of emotional detachment that sometimes felt inhuman. Finally, the remaining handful of fighters vanished into the labyrinthine streets of Adira. The radio was quiet save for the rumble of the incoming QRF strikers. "Overwatch 7, this is Ranger 24, Thorne's voice, no longer strained but solid and deeply grateful, cut through the quiet. "We are clear of the industrial zone. All personnel accounted for, moving to extraction. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. You saved us." Reyna had fired 127 rounds. Her target tally stood at 38 confirmed kills. The ambush had been defeated. She slung her rifle, checked her gear, and began the 2-kilometer walk back to the extraction point. She did not stop to look back at the ridge or at the shattered compound. She simply walked, step by weary step, leaving behind the silent, invisible battle she had fought alone. The sun was higher now, the sand dust settling. All that was left was the walk home. Did anyone notice her at all? When Staff Sergeant Reyna Calder finally reached the extraction point, an open, dusty lot, where the QRF strikers were consolidating the Rangers for transport. She moved with the quiet humility of someone who had just finished a long, grueling day of physically demanding work. She was covered in fine, ochre desert dust. Her face was set in the expression of focused exhaustion familiar to every soldier who has survived a serious contact. She walked among the relieved, adrenaline-burnt Rangers, but for a moment, the vast, powerful emotional reality of what she had done remained unseen, like a hidden current. Her presence was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The Rangers, wired from the firefight, were checking wounds, securing gear, and relishing the sudden, unexpected relief of survival. She moved to the edge of the assembly, began breaking down her M110, cleaning the bolt carrier group and securing the system. She was ignored, not out of disrespect, but because her role had been distant, spectral, and fundamentally isolated from their close-quarters chaos. They had heard Overwatch 7, but they hadn't seen the human behind the call sign. Thorn was the first to recognize her. He was leaning against a striker, his medic patching a shrapnel tear in his shoulder. He saw her cleaning her rifle, a solitary, methodical figure, and the full reality of her single-handed intervention crashed down on him. He pushed off the vehicle and walked straight to her, his movements heavy with fatigue and something deeper. He stopped a foot away, looked at the mud and dust on her face, and simply extended a hand. "Staff Sergeant Calder," he said, his voice husky with raw gratitude. "Mark Thorn, Ranger 24. Reyna stopped cleaning, straightened up, and met his grip, a firm, professional shake. "Sergeant Thorn, glad to see you all walking." "Walking," Thorn repeated, looking back at his patrol. "We were finished. That ambush was planned, executed by professionals. We were surrounded and the comms were garbage. We walked right into a meat grinder and we knew it." He searched for the right words, the correct military language for a miracle. "Then, the guns went quiet. The high threats went silent. We didn't know who or what it was. We just knew someone was out there pulling us out." She held his gaze, her expression unwavering. "That's the job, Sergeant. Overwatch means keeping you alive. I just found the most effective point of pressure on their perimeter." But the tactical explanation couldn't contain the truth. Thorn shook his head slowly. 38 confirmed kills in 23 minutes. You didn't just suppress them, Staff Sergeant. You dismantled them. You broke their will. You turned a disaster into a survival story. That's not just a job, that's something else entirely. The younger Rangers began to approach, drawn by Thorn's intensity. Corporal Owen Cross, the 22-year-old, his face still pale under a coating of grit, came forward, his hands trembling slightly from the last vestiges of adrenaline. "Ma'am," he said, swallowing hard. "I'm Cross. I thought I was going to die today. We were taking fire from everywhere. But then the fire just stopped. Like a switch was flipped. I kept thinking, who is that? Who is strong enough to do that?" He couldn't hide the genuine, almost childlike reverence in his eyes. "Thank you for getting us home, for letting me call my wife tonight." Reyna met his emotional intensity with a calm, grounding presence. She understood that this was the soldier's need, to connect the abstract violence with the tangible human who made it possible. "You fought well, Corporal," she said simply. "You held your position and covered your teammates. I just cleared the way. You did the hard part." But there was a subtle internal conflict in her own mind. She had spent 5 years training to be a phantom, a dispassionate observer whose only output was cold, surgical violence. Yet here, faced with the overwhelming, messy reality of the men she had saved, the pride she felt was personal and profound. It wasn't the pride of a hunter. It was the quiet, sustaining satisfaction of a protector. The recognition was not for glory, but for purpose fulfilled. Staff Sergeant Morneau, the veteran weapon squad leader, gave her a crisp, heartfelt salute. "Calder, I've seen some shooting in my time. What you pulled off today, that was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Perfect target calls, perfect placement under the clock. You are, without hyperbole, the reason all 12 of us are standing here." He raised his fist, a gesture of deep battlefield respect, and Reyna responded in kind. As the last wounded Ranger was loaded into the striker, Thorn came back to her. "We're heading back to Camp Hawthorne now. You're riding with us." He paused. I'm putting you up for the Bronze Star with V, no question. But more than that, I want to know. How? What does it take to maintain that level of absolute control when you know the entire situation depends on your next breath? Raina slung her pack, the weight familiar and comforting. I was thinking about the equation, Sergeant. The range, the wind, the target priority. Not the consequence, just the next step. It's the training and the understanding that my mission is simple. Eliminate the threat, protect the team. But there was something else, a personal truth she kept guarded. But there was something I hadn't told them. Not yet. The truth was that in the worst moments of combat, she didn't focus on them at all. She focused on the memory of her younger brother, killed in a traffic accident she felt she could have prevented. She focused on the impossible, terrifying weight of not being there when someone needed her. That shadow of failure was the secret fuel of her absolute discipline. She would never fail to protect those she was sworn to guard again. That inner resolve, born of personal tragedy, was the true source of her icy calm. Why do the hardest lessons always come after the threat has passed? The ride back to Camp Hawthorne was a long, jolting journey in the cramped back of the Stryker. The smell of dust, sweat, and spent gunpowder hung heavy in the air. Raina sat opposite Sergeant First Class Thorne, his medic working on the shrapnel graze on his shoulder. Around them, the Rangers, exhausted but safe, were managing their wounds and their surging adrenaline. The relief in the vehicle was a palpable force, a collective exhale that spoke volumes about the fear they had just survived. Thorne, however, was quiet, his eyes fixed on Raina. He wasn't just grateful, he was analytically curious, trying to dissect the impossible performance he had just witnessed. He recognized the profound, lonely power she wielded. "Staff Sergeant," he began, his voice a low, steady rumble. "When you saw that ambush forming this morning and you knew our comms were dead, what was your thought process? Did you consider calling off the mission yourself, or were you immediately calculating how to fight it?" Raina leaned forward slightly, resting her forearms on her knees. She appreciated the professional honesty in his question. He wanted to understand the machine, not just praise the result. "I tried to break contact first, Sergeant," she explained, recalling the initial desperate attempts to raise them on the radio. "When that failed, my primary objective became threat elimination. It was a tactical problem. The human element, the fact that I was alone or that you were trapped, I filtered that out. It becomes noise." She described the logic. "I was asking, how can I be most effective from this position? How do I multiply our force of 12 by 1? The answer was prioritization. Heavy weapons first, the PKMs and RPGs, they kill an entire team in seconds. Then leadership, the guys coordinating the effort. Then anyone actively trying to flank or breach your position." She concluded simply. The equation was 12 Rangers plus 1 sniper versus an ambush that didn't know I existed. Surprise and precision were my force multipliers. Thorne nodded slowly, letting the cold efficiency of her approach sink in. "You have ice water in your veins, Calder. I've seen men freeze up just aiming at a static target at 200 meters, let alone hitting a running target at 550 under direct fire." She corrected him gently, a soft moral reflection threaded into her tactical truth. "It's not ice water, Sergeant. It's training and the knowledge that fear is just information." She watched the expressions of the younger Rangers in the Stryker, especially Owen Cross, who was still visibly shaken. "It tells you the stakes are real and that you need to be sharp. You acknowledge it, compartmentalize it, and you push it down to your muscles. Your body does the job even if your mind wants to panic." Drew Collins, the quiet breacher, posed the essential, difficult question that always surfaced after such focused violence. "With every shot, Staff Sergeant, what were you thinking? The target or the person? It has to weigh on you, right?" Raina took a long moment before answering, choosing her words with extreme care, revealing a vital piece of her internal defense mechanism. "I was thinking about you guys, keeping you alive," she said firmly. "The targets were threats because of the weapons they carried and the imminent danger they represented to my team." She drew a clear line in the moral sand she had to maintain to keep functioning. "My job is to remove the threat. I focus on the weapon system, the danger it poses, and the most efficient way to stop it. I don't dwell on the person or the life they were living. That is how I keep this work from destroying me. I focus entirely on the purpose, protecting the team. But the secret, the thing she hadn't told them, the deeper, emotional undercurrent that made her discipline absolute, was the ghost of her younger brother, Alex. She carried an immense, suppressed guilt over his death, a reckless accident she felt she should have prevented if only she had been faster, smarter, more present. That feeling of helpless failure, of not being where she needed to be when a life was on the line, was the internal engine of her phenomenal control. The chaos of combat, paradoxically, was the only place she could redeem that feeling. On that ridge, facing 32 hostiles, she had the power, the skill, and the choice. She would not fail to protect her team. That single-minded, self-imposed standard of perfection was the true meaning of the silence before her trigger squeeze. Was the mission a tactical victory, or a profound emotional cost? At Camp Hawthorne, the dusty, sun-baked hub of the area of operations, the debrief began almost immediately. Colonel Mira Sutton, the battalion commander, a lean, formidable woman with a reputation for sharp intelligence and zero tolerance for incompetence, presided over the review. Raina sat across the table, surrounded by the intelligence, operations, and command staff. She walked them through the timeline with the detached precision of a machine. The hostile count, the communication breakdown, the shift from overwatch to direct intervention, the prioritization of threats, and the final tally. Major Ryan Cho, the operations officer, reviewed the data. He pulled up aerial imagery showing the compound and Raina's ridge position, cross-referencing her account with drone footage and ranger reports. 38 confirmed kills, Cho said, his voice quiet with professional astonishment. Average engagement range 520 meters. Combat duration 23 minutes under direct fire, most of which was aimed at your position. He looked at the colonel. Ma'am, these numbers are exceptional. A 94% hit rate under severe combat stress. Staff Sergeant Calder systematically dismantled a professional ambush. Colonel Sutton leaned forward, her gaze intense. She wasn't just measuring skill, she was measuring moral fiber. Staff Sergeant, you operated outside the traditional scope of your duties when communications failed. Did you ever feel you were compromising your position or exposing yourself to undue risk by engaging so aggressively? No, ma'am, Raina replied, her voice steady. The immediate and imminent threat to Ranger 24 outweighed the risk to my own position. The enemy was focused on the patrol in the compound. They were firing blind at my area. My position offered good cover and concealment. The only unacceptable risk was allowing the ambush to succeed. She explained that her focus was on efficiency. I was a single element of force that could shift the entire battle. My calculation was simple. The faster I neutralized the threats, the safer the patrol would be. I prioritized success over personal safety. Colonel Sutton looked at Thorne, who was sitting in on the debrief. Sergeant Thorne, your assessment. Thorne spoke without hesitation, his voice ringing with conviction. Colonel, she didn't just save us. She delivered a profound psychological defeat to the enemy force. She took away their ability to coordinate, their heavy weapons, and their leadership. We went from being pinned and taking casualties to executing a clean withdrawal in under 30 minutes. Her intervention was the single most decisive factor. She earned every commendation she's due. The colonel turned back to Raina, a rare, small flicker of admiration in her eyes. I concur. Staff Sergeant, I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. More importantly, I'm putting you up for accelerated promotion to Sergeant First Class and a move to the regiment's senior sniper instructor cadre. She paused, emphasizing the final point. The regiment needs operators with your level of tactical judgment and control to train the next generation. Raina absorbed the news, the medal, the promotion, the move to instructor duty. The determination that had saved 12 lives now shifted its focus. It was not the glory that resonated, but the purpose. She would be training young soldiers, giving them the tools to survive moments like the Adira ambush. She would pass on the lesson of the ridge, that absolute control is the key to life, and that the only true path to safety is through perfect, disciplined execution. The debrief ended, but the emotional cost of the fight was just beginning to surface. Later that evening, alone in her quiet, stark barracks room, the memory of the past 24 hours finally broke through the wall of professional focus. It was not the death she remembered, but the silence between the shots, the lonely concentration, and the chilling realization that for 23 minutes she had held the entirety of her world, the lives of her comrades, her own future, in the delicate tension of her trigger finger. She hadn't felt fear on the ridge, but she felt a profound, exhausting, internal tremor now. She thought again of her younger brother, Alex. The guilt had never truly left her. It was the heavy anchor that kept her so steady in the storm. On the ridge, she had redeemed a part of that failure. She had acted when others couldn't. She had been the answer. The greatest victory was not over the enemy, but over the self-doubt, the fear, and the haunting shadow of the past. Her competence was the only language of her redemption. 7. Didn't the solitude change her? 6 months later, the dust of Adira was replaced by the crisp, damp air of Fort Summit, Georgia. Raina had been promoted to Sergeant First Class and had successfully transitioned into her new role, Senior Sniper Instructor for the Ranger Regiment. She stood on a range, overlooking a series of complex target arrays, mentoring a new generation of snipers. Among her current class was Private First Class Noah Lane, the young man from Louisiana she had mentored on her last rotation. Noah was diligent, talented, but still grappling with the sheer, isolated gravity of the sniper's task. Raina was teaching him a core lesson, not about ballistics but about the mental landscape of long-distance killing. When you're out there 2 kilometers away and your patrol is walking into a trap, she instructed quietly, the temptation is to rush, to panic, to fire on the first clear target. Don't. She paused, letting the implication sink in. Your first shot must always be your best shot because it is the one that sets the tone. It buys your team time. She focused intently on Noah's inner conflict, recognizing the raw, exposed anxiety that came from realizing the full weight of responsibility. You saw the situation at Dharana, she reminded him. You had a clear shot on the RPG team. You took it, and you saved those 9 Rangers. But tell me, what was the hardest part of that engagement for you? Noah swallowed, his jaw tight. The second before the shot, Sergeant First Class, the silence. I knew that the second I pulled the trigger it was final. That level of responsibility, it's heavy. Raina nodded. That feeling, the internal tremor of the soul acknowledging its profound power, was necessary. It meant he was human. It never gets easier, Noah. You just get better at carrying the weight. You have to focus on the technical task. Treat the target not as a person, but as a system you need to neutralize. The faster and more precisely you break their ability to fight, the safer your people are. She framed it in terms of protection, shifting the moral burden from taking a life to saving 12. She spoke of the silent resilience learned on the ridge, the ability to endure direct, wild enemy fire without flinching, without breaking concentration. The enemy will try to find you. They will fire blind. You have to trust your position, trust your training, and stay small. Do not react to their chaos. Maintain your own order. That is the sniper's silent contract. It was a form of personal redemption for her, this teaching. She was sharing the lessons learned not from a textbook, but from the brutal crucible of the Adira ambush. Every time a student grasped the core concept of controlled chaos, of using fear as a focusing tool, she felt the pressure of her own suppressed guilt ease. She was ensuring that other Rangers would have a protector, a guardian who would not fail them. But the isolation had left its mark. When she was surrounded by people, she often felt deeply alone. She had seen things from a distance, with a chilling clarity that others never experienced. She knew the exact moment life left a body at 500 meters. This unique, awful knowledge created a chasm between her and the rest of the world. She didn't seek the camaraderie of her former patrol. She maintained a quiet, professional distance, her true self guarded by a relentless devotion to her craft. The solitude was her shield, protecting her from the messy, demanding emotional reality she had to suppress to excel at her job. She was the quiet professional, the one whose reputation preceded her not through boastfulness, but through the irrefutable, deadly truth of the after-action report. The legend of the Ridge was becoming a central tenet of the sniper program. A single individual's discipline can defeat an entire professional threat. She was proof that courage wasn't a loud shout or a reckless charge, but a slow, controlled exhale before an impossible shot. She taught them that the most important weapon a sniper carries is not the rifle, but the absolute control over their own mind. That control, born of fire and tragedy, was the only way home. Was she really just a product of training, or something more? The regimental award ceremony was held beneath a vast hangar, the flag hanging motionless in the still Georgia air. Staff Sergeant Raina Calder stood at rigid attention as the colonel pinned the bronze star with valor onto her uniform. Thorne and his entire patrol stood in the front row. When the citation was read, the exact words detailing the 38 confirmed kills, the 23 minutes of absolute control, the deliberate and decisive action that saved 12 lives, the hangar fell into a reverent silence. It was the sound of truth, finally acknowledged. After the ceremony, Thorne approached her, his face alight with respect. He presented her with a small, engraved compass, not a formal gift, but a simple, personal marker of gratitude. This is from the patrol, Sergeant First Class, so you always find your way back to us. You were our compass that day. Raina accepted the gift, the metal cool and solid in her hand. It was an overwhelming moment of pure, unsullied connection. She was a ranger. They were her family. She had carried the weight of their lives, and they, in turn, recognized the invisible battle she had fought alone. Morneau, the older veteran, slapped her gently on the shoulder. "The instructors use your story every day now," he said. "The sniper who came through the smoke and took apart an entire ambush. You're a legend already, Calder. They use you as proof of what one soldier with skill and will can do when everything is collapsing." When the students asked her about fear, about being outnumbered, being under fire, having 12 lives depending on a single pull of the trigger, she always offered the same final lesson, the one that encompassed all her pain, all her discipline, and all her purpose. She would pause, let the silence build, and then speak the truth she had forged on the ridge. Fear is just information. It reminds you the stakes are real and that your work matters. She would meet the students' eyes, sharing a profound, quiet wisdom. You acknowledge it, respect it, then set it aside and focus on what you can control. Your breathing, your aim, your trigger, your target. Her voice would drop to a low, powerful register. Because somewhere down in that city, valley, or compound, rangers are fighting for their lives and counting on you to be perfect when it counts most. She would pause one last time, letting the moral weight of the statement settle. "That's not pressure," she would conclude, the final words ringing with clarity and profound hope. "That's purpose." Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. 8. When does a legend stop being a story and start becoming a responsibility? Raina stood on the training range at Fort Summit, the late afternoon sun casting long, pale shadows across the Georgia scrubland. Her life had achieved a certain symmetry. The chaos of combat, the terrifying solitude of the ridge, had been exchanged for the disciplined order of the instructor's role. She was the embodiment of the lesson she taught, that the difference between survival and disaster is measured in millimeters of aim and milliseconds of self-control. Her students, the next generation of Ranger snipers, finished their day's qualification shoot, packing their gear with the focused energy she had instilled in them. They were good, technically superb, but they lacked the necessary temper. They hadn't yet felt the cold, existential certainty that their next breath was the only thing standing between their patrol and total annihilation. That was the last lesson she had to give. She waited until Private First Class Noah Lane, her protege, was the only one left. He approached her, his rifle cased, his expression thoughtful. "Sergeant First Class," he said, "I hit 98% today, but I know I was forcing the last few shots. I was trying to chase the perfect score and I lost my rhythm." Reyna nodded. This was the moment, the difference between competence and mastery. The mistake wasn't the shot, Noah, it was the focus. You stopped focusing on the purpose, which is the mission, and started focusing on the result, the score. She shared a final, personal reflection that went beyond the ballistics and the wind calls. The biggest battle on that ridge in Adira wasn't the enemy. It was my own mind. When the bullets are cracking and you know 12 lives depend on you, the pressure is immense. It begs you to rush. It whispers promises of failure. She admitted a difficult truth to him, a secret she rarely shared. "I didn't let the fear stop me. I channeled the guilt." She told him of her younger brother, Alex, of the accident she couldn't prevent, the helplessness that had haunted her. "Every time I look through that scope, I'm telling myself, you have the power now. You will not fail. You will be there for them." The secret was that her extraordinary resilience was not a gift. It was a self-imposed penance, a commitment born from tragedy. She had taken her deepest wound and turned it into an absolute professional standard. "That's why you can't focus on the person you're shooting, Noah," she said, her voice soft but absolute. "You focus on the act of protection. The goal is to ensure the 12 Rangers below you go home to their families. The action you take is the only path to that outcome. You swap one burden for the other, the heavy weight of the job for the crushing weight of failure." She looked out at the fading light, the range falling silent. The story of the ridge, the 38 confirmed kills, the impossible control, had made her a legend. But the truth was simpler. She was just a ranger who refused to fail her patrol. She had found her purpose not in seeking danger, but in serving as the ultimate disciplined guardian against it. The day you stop thinking about the score and start thinking only about the safety of your patrol, Reyna concluded, turning to him, that is the day you become a sniper. Noah understood. He saw the quiet, profound weight of her purpose. He saw the strength that comes not from heroism, but from an almost spiritual dedication to discipline. Reyna left him to gather his thoughts, walking away from the range. She walked towards the barracks, the bronze star pinned to her uniform reflecting the last rays of the sun. The medal, the promotion, the legend, they were simply the outward markers of an inward, solitary vow she had made to herself and to the regiment. The hardest truth in her lonely profession was that the moral compass must spin true, even when the world is chaos. She hadn't sought to be a hero. She had simply acted with the maximum competence the moment demanded. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.